Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. The terminal was packed, babies crying, rolling suitcases thudding over tile, intercoms announcing flight delays every other minute. I stood there in the middle of it all, gripping the handle of my old green duffel bag like it was the only solid thing left in the world. My name is David Callahan. I'm 68 years old, retired from a lifetime of turning wrenches at a garage in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I don't take a lot of trips, but this one was supposed to be special. Eric, my son, had called me a few months ago with that wide-eyed enthusiasm he always turned on when he wanted something. "Dad, what do you say to a fishing trip in Alaska? Just you, me, and Vanessa. It'll be like old times." He said he'd cover the flights and lodgings, but I offered to pitch in for the boat rental, nearly $4,000. I was happy to do it. What's money for, if not to make memories? I looked up at the departures board again. Flight 761 to Anchorage, Gate B12, on time. I checked my phone. Nothing. He was supposed to meet me here an hour ago. I tried calling him once, straight to voicemail. I tried again. This time, he picked up. "Hey, Dad," he said, sounding winded. In the background, I could hear airport chatter and the ding of an overhead announcement. "Look, about that. We're already on the plane." I blinked. "What? What do you mean?" "We had to board early. Vanessa didn't want to wait around. It was just easier this way." I stared out over the sea of strangers in the terminal, not fully processing. "But I'm here. I'm at the gate." A high-pitched laugh crackled through the speaker. Vanessa. "He actually showed up? That's adorable." Then her voice dropped to a mock whisper, dripping with sarcasm. "Tell him the anchor's staying ashore." Eric chuckled nervously. "Look, Dad, it just didn't make sense, okay? Vanessa said you'd slow things down. It's nothing personal." I stood frozen, like I'd just been punched in the gut. My hand trembled around the phone. I could feel people brushing past me, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I whispered, "You left me?" Eric sighed. "I'll make it up to you, okay? Gotta go, they're closing the cabin door." The call disconnected. I stood there for a long time, just me and my bag. I had worn my old fishing jacket, the one he gave me when he was 12. It still had the faded patch with his initials sewed in. I felt like a damn fool. I turned slowly and walked out of the terminal. The automatic doors hissed open, letting in a gust of hot summer air. My heart beat like a war drum in my chest, but my face stayed calm. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something settled in me right then, something heavy and sharp. They thought I was an anchor? Fine. Let's see how they sail without me. The cab smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and pine-scented air freshener. I slid into the back seat, my duffel bag landing beside me with a tired thump. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Heading home?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah. Brookline Drive, by the river." He pulled away from the curb as the sky opened up, soft rain tapping the windows like fingers on glass. The airport shrank behind us. I watched it disappear without a word. "Rough day?" he asked after a moment. I hesitated, then exhaled. "You could say that. I get it. Name's Tom, by the way." He turned on the wipers. "You'd be surprised how many people leave this airport looking like they just got sucker punched." I gave a tired chuckle. My son invited me on a fishing trip to Alaska. Said he had the tickets, wanted me to come along. I paid for part of the charter. I paused. They boarded without me. Tom whistled low. "Damn, that's cold." I looked out the window. The rain blurred the city lights into soft smears. I remembered buying Eric his first boat, some beat-up fiberglass thing with a half-dead motor. Took every spare dollar I had. He'd been 17. I put him through college, I said, more to myself than to Tom. Paid off his loans. When he couldn't afford the down payment for his house, I dipped into my retirement. Tom nodded slowly. "Kids, they take a lot out of you. I've got 2 of my own. Hardly hear from them unless they need something." I looked at his reflection. "You still help them?" He shrugged. "When I can. You give because you love, but they don't always give back." Those words sat with me like gravel in my gut. We passed the old gas station where Eric used to beg for candy after soccer practice. I gripped the keyring in my pocket. I remembered standing in line at the DMV with him when he got his license. God, I was proud. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. They called me an anchor, like I was holding them back. Number, I wasn't an anchor. I was the engine, the fuel, the damn hull that kept them afloat. By the time the cab turned onto my street, I'd stopped feeling sad. What I felt now was something heavier, sharper. Tom pulled up in front of my house. "You sure you'll be all right, mister?" I handed him a 20 and met his eyes in the mirror. I've never been more sure, and I meant it. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Not peaceful, just still. The kind of silence that settles in after something breaks and no one bothers to fix it. I kicked off my boots and left my duffel by the door. The rain was still ticking softly against the windows. I stood there for a moment, dripping and motionless. Everything looked the same. The framed photos on the wall, the couch that Eric picked out when he and Vanessa moved in for just a few months. That was over 2 years ago. I wandered into the living room. My eyes landed on a picture from Eric's high school graduation. Me with my arm around his shoulders, him holding up his diploma with that cocky grin. I'd worked double shifts for 6 months to cover his senior trip and cap and gown fees. He never thanked me for that. Not once. Next to it was a photo of us fishing on Lake Huron. He was about 10. That was the summer I taught him how to cast with a bait caster. He caught a smallmouth so big we mounted it. I paid for the taxidermy too. And then came the wedding photos. Big, showy, expensive. Vanessa's dress had cost more than my truck. I'd written the check for the reception without blinking. They said they'd pay me back. They never did. I moved into the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept the bank cards. 3 of them had both our names on them. I held them in my hand like they were snakes. I remembered signing the forms when Eric said it would just help with emergencies. I guess I was the emergency. I stood there for a long while. The fridge hummed behind me. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe creaked in the wall. This house, every nail and floorboard. I built most of it myself after Linda passed. I made this place a home, and somehow, I'd let it become theirs. I looked around, jaw clenched, hands tight on the cards. No more. They had taken enough, my money, my space, my time, and today, my dignity. I whispered to the empty room, "Enough." Then I turned off the kitchen light and started planning. The next morning, I brewed a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my phone and a notepad. My hands were steady, my breath even. What I felt wasn't rage anymore, it was clarity. I dialed the bank. After a few rings, a woman answered. "First River Credit Union, this is Amanda. How can I help you?" I cleared my throat. "Hi, Amanda. I need to remove 2 authorized users from my checking and savings accounts. Their names are Eric Callahan and Vanessa Callahan." There was a pause on the line. "Are you the primary account holder?" "Yes, David Callahan." I could hear the clicking of keys. "Okay, Mr. Callahan. Just a moment while I pull up your profile." "Got it." "Would you like this change effective immediately?" "Yes, ma'am, and I'd like new cards issued. No forwarding address." Another pause. "Understood." As she walked me through the verification steps, I kept thinking about that trip, how they were probably out on that boat right now, drinking, laughing. Maybe Eric had just swiped one of the cards to pay for lunch or bait or whatever else. Maybe he hadn't even noticed what was missing yet. But he would. Amanda's voice returned. "You're all set, Mr. Callahan. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I let out a slow breath. "No, ma'am, that's it." I ended the call and stared out the window. The sun was finally cutting through the gray. The street looked cleaner somehow. 10 minutes later, the first text came in. "Eric, hey, did something happen with the joint card?" It just declined. Then another. "Eric, Dad?" And another. "Eric, are you serious right now? We're on a trip." Then voicemail. His voice started out calm, confused, then frustrated, then full of heat. I didn't press play. I set the phone face down on the table and took a sip of coffee. It was bitter, but it tasted right. That money had been mine, my labor, my retirement, and I'd spent years handing it over without question. Not anymore. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and tossed the old card Eric used into the trash. Let him figure it out. The leash was off. The next morning, I buttoned up a clean flannel shirt and drove into town. The sky was clear for once, but my mood stayed gray. Mr. Hensley's office sat above a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon and burnt coffee. I'd known him for years. He handled the paperwork when Linda passed, and again when I added Eric to my will. Now I was here to take him out of it. "Morning, David," Mr. Hensley said, standing to shake my hand as I walked in. Come on in. I sat across from him, resting my hands on the edge of the desk. I need to update my will, I said, voice flat. I want to remove Eric Callahan as a beneficiary. He blinked. Remove him? You sure? I nodded. I'm sure. He hesitated. You know I'm required to ask. This isn't being done out of duress or spite, is it? I gave a tired laugh. No duress, no spite, just clarity. He studied me for a moment, then slid a folder toward himself and began typing. All right then. Who do you want the estate to go to instead? I haven't decided yet, I admitted. But I'd rather leave it to a dog shelter than let him or that wife of his touch one more penny. Mr. Hensley gave a short nod and kept working. He didn't ask questions after that, just did his job. When the papers were ready, I signed each page with slow, steady strokes. And just like that, Eric was out. I walked out of the office feeling lighter, still bitter, but less burdened. On the sidewalk, I nearly bumped into Margaret, my next-door neighbor, widow. Wore big glasses and always brought over tomatoes in the summer. Well, don't you look like a man with a mission, she said, smiling. I raised an eyebrow. That obvious? She tilted her head. You've got the face of someone who's done something hard but necessary. I nodded. You ever cut someone out of your life and feel guilty about how good it feels? She gave a knowing chuckle. My nephew tried to trick me into signing over my house 2 years ago. I changed the locks while he was at lunch. Best sleep I'd had in 10 years. We stood in silence for a moment, two people who understood what it meant to draw the line. You want some coffee? She asked. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. We walked down the sidewalk together, the sun warm on our backs. I was pulling weeds out by the mailbox when a black SUV pulled into my driveway. At first, I didn't recognize it. Then I saw who stepped out. Slick hair, leather jacket, too many rings on his fingers. Mason, Eric's old college buddy, the one who always had something to sell and nothing to offer. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt off my jeans. You lost? He smiled like a man who thought he still had charm. Hey, David, mind if I have a word? I crossed my arms. If this is about Eric, save your breath. He walked closer, hands in his pockets. Look, I know things got tense, but Eric's upset. Says you cut off his access, changed the accounts. He's confused, man. Confused? I said. He left me at an airport and used my money to do it. He's not confused. He's cornered. Mason tilted his head like he was trying to be gentle. Come on, David. He's your son. Blood's blood. You don't just turn your back on family. I didn't flinch. You think blood gives someone a license to drain you dry? To humiliate you? Mason sighed and took another step forward. Eric's hurting. You were like his safety net. You don't just pull the rug out from under a guy like that. I didn't pull the rug, I said. I just stopped laying it out for someone who walks all over me. His tone shifted. Look, I'm just trying to help, okay? You cut him off, he's stranded out there with no backup. That's not going to sit right with him. My eyes narrowed. That a warning? He smirked, but his voice dropped. Eric's not going to let this slide. He feels betrayed. Then he's finally feeling what I've felt for years, I snapped. And if he sent you here to scare me, you can tell him to get braver friends. We stood in silence. The air between us was heavy. Your call, old man, Mason muttered, turning back toward his SUV. I watched him drive off without another word. Then I went inside and locked every door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the first time in a long while I stood my ground without apologizing, and I wasn't backing down. The locksmith showed up early the next morning, a wiry guy named Kenny, with a beat-up van and a quiet way of working. I didn't ask questions, just pointed to every door in the house and said, change it all. While he worked, I carried cardboard boxes up from the basement. One by one, I started filling them with Eric and Vanessa's things, her designer shoes lined up like trophies, his golf clubs that hadn't seen a course in over a year, drawers full of overpriced skin cream and cologne I'd never touched. I didn't bother sorting anything. I just packed it. Eric's old room had slowly turned into their closet. As I folded his dress shirts and shoved them into a box, I paused at the sight of a photo frame on the nightstand. It was the three of us, me, Eric, and Vanessa, at the lake cabin years ago, before the resentment, before the taking. I flipped it over and dropped it into the bottom of the box without a second thought. Margaret showed up around noon, holding a Tupperware of lemon bars. Saw the locksmith van, she said. You're really doing it. I wiped sweat off my brow. Yeah, I am. She stepped inside and looked at the boxes stacked by the entryway. You know they won't take this quietly. I'm counting on it, I said. Let them huff and puff. They're not blowing this house down. She raised an eyebrow. You're not worried they'll cause a scene? Oh, I know they will. That's why I wrote them a note. I grabbed a Sharpie and scrawled on a blank sheet of printer paper. You don't live here anymore. Collect your things. I taped it to the biggest box and set it near the door. Margaret handed me a lemon bar. You know, for what it's worth, I think Linda would be proud of you. That one caught me off guard. I didn't say anything, just nodded and looked away. Later that afternoon, as I hauled the last box to the porch, I heard the distant drone of a plane overhead. Probably theirs, probably on time. I stood there, listening until the sound faded into the clouds. The locks were changed. The house was clean. Their things were packed and waiting. I was ready. It was past midnight when the headlights swept across the front yard. I was already sitting in the dark, behind the curtain, watching. The cab pulled up fast, then idled. Eric stepped out first, dragging a roller bag and muttering something under his breath. Vanessa followed, arms flailing, her voice sharp even through the glass. They looked nothing like the smug vacationers I imagined boarding that plane. They looked exhausted, damp, angry. Eric walked straight to the front door and shoved his key in. It didn't turn. He tried again, harder. Then he rattled the knob like he could will the lock to remember him. What the hell? Vanessa hissed. He knocked once, then twice. Dad, he shouted, open the damn door. I didn't move. I stood behind the curtain with the lights off and my fists clenched. He banged harder. What's going on? You changed the locks? Vanessa stepped off the porch and spotted the boxes under the awning. Her heels sank into the wet grass as she ran toward them. Are you serious? Our stuff's out here? Rain started to fall, soft at first, then heavy. The cardboard sagged almost instantly. She tore into one of the boxes and yanked out a bag of her clothes, holding it like a drowned cat. You've got to be kidding me, she screamed, flinging a pair of shoes into the yard. He just threw our stuff out. Eric turned back to the door and pounded with both fists. Dad, you can't do this. I stayed quiet, watching. You think this is funny? Vanessa shouted at the windows. We just spent 3 days dealing with canceled bookings and blocked cards, and now this? Eric slammed his palm against the door again. This is our home. Number? It was mine. This is petty, old man, he shouted. You're being a coward. I didn't respond. Say something, he yelled. You're seriously hiding behind the door like some damn child? I let them scream. Let the rain soak them. Let them stand there and feel what it was like to be shut out, to be left behind. Vanessa finally threw her soaked purse down and cursed so loud it echoed. Eric's voice cracked once before going quiet. They stood there a while longer, defeated. Then, without another word, they picked up what they could carry and walked back to the cab. The door closed. The engine started. I watched the taillights disappear through the mist, and only then did I exhale. Morning broke quiet and gray. I stood by the front window, coffee in hand, watching the taxi pull away from the curb. Eric and Vanessa were soaked to the bone, their suitcases dripping as they loaded them into the trunk. Vanessa was still talking, flailing her arms like she was blaming him for everything. Eric just stared at the pavement like it might give him a solution. I didn't open the door, didn't wave, just watched. The cab pulled off slowly. For the first time in years, the house felt still. Then my phone started buzzing on the kitchen counter. Voicemail, text, voicemail, again. I walked over and picked it up. Eric, voicemail. Dad, come on. What the hell are you doing? We need to talk. This is insane. Eric, text. You seriously gonna do this to your own son, after everything? Another ping. Eric, voicemail. You're making a huge mistake. We're family. You don't just shut people out like this. A minute later, Eric, text. Please, just call me. The shift was always the same. Anger, then guilt, then begging. I didn't answer. Instead, I made tea. Sat down at the kitchen table. Let the warmth of the cup calm the shake in my fingers. The storm was outside now, not in me. I looked around the kitchen, scuffed tile floors, oak cabinets I'd built myself. That dent in the fridge door from when Eric ran into it with a toy truck when he was 6. I used to look at that mark and smile. Now, I just felt tired. But I also felt lighter. On the counter sat a note in Margaret's neat handwriting. Coffee tomorrow? My treat. M. I ran my thumb over the paper and smiled. She didn't push, just offered a chair at her table. That was enough. This wasn't about punishing Eric anymore. Not really. This was about claiming the years I had left. For myself. For peace. I glanced at the front door. Locked. Boxes gone. Air still. I sipped my tea and let the silence hold me. For the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like a beginning. The cafe was tucked between a florist and a dry cleaner, the kind of place that served real butter with toast and didn't play music too loud. I spotted Margaret by the window, waving with a smile that somehow didn't feel forced. I sat down across from her, still unsure if this was a thank you for the lemon bars kind of coffee or something more. But she slid a cup toward me and said, "You look better." "Better than what?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Than you did a week ago." That's a compliment, in case it's unclear. We talked about easy things, her garden, the squirrels tearing up her mulch again, my plans to finally repaint the garage door. Somewhere in the middle of it, I realized I wasn't bracing for a guilt trip. I wasn't guarding my words or waiting for someone to ask for something. It was just nice. On the way home, I stopped at the market and picked up apples, butter, and flour. Back in my kitchen, I rolled out the dough slowly, letting the rhythm of it settle my nerves. It had been years since I made pie from scratch. Linda used to do the baking. After she passed, the oven had become more of a storage spot for pans I didn't use. But today felt different. When the timer dinged and the smell of cinnamon filled the house, I pulled the pie from the oven and just stood there, breathing it in. A knock at the door. I opened it to find Margaret holding a small bouquet of daisies in one hand and a bottle of sparkling cider in the other. "Thought we could celebrate," she said. "You know, this new chapter you're starting." I stepped aside to let her in. "Smells like apple pie in here," she said, eyeing the cooling rack. "And freedom." We ate at the table, passing slices back and forth and laughing at nothing in particular. The house felt full, but not crowded, warm, but not loud. Before she left, Margaret said, "Some of the neighbors are coming over Friday. You should join us. Nothing fancy, just food and good company." I nodded. I think I'd like that. And I meant it. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's provider, backup plan, or stepping stone. I was just David, and that was enough.